What is shaking, Internet? This is Saltz bringing you the How to Tank for Dummies Brewmaster Monk Guide for the patch 6.0, or the introductory patch for Warlords of Draenor. This guide is intended for those brand new to tanking, so if you're just interested in a quick rundown of the changes, click the annotation in the video now, or the link in the description below to jump to the end of the video where I discuss what's different from MoP. The Monk is a master of martial arts, using their fists and legs to deflect blows and strike quickly. They move like water, tanking enemies by dodging blows and using their mind to ignore the pain in the present moment. You like that description? Awesome. Monks are incredibly unique as tanks, first because they are the only tank that uses energy as a resource. Energy starts as a full bar, and some abilities cost energy to use. Energy replenishes rapidly and can't increase from its maximum based on your stats, unlike mana. Now, the second point that makes monks unique is their stagger mechanic. Basically, monks only take a percentage of each hit's damage, and the other percent is done over a period of time. For example, if I take 1,000 damage from a hit and have 50% stagger, I will take 500 damage now, and 500 damage over the next 10 seconds. This makes monks take less burst damage, but the same damage over a period of time. However, as we'll see, you have many mechanics to deal with this extra DOT damage. Now, the final thing to discuss before diving in is the monk's second resource, Chi. Some moves generate Chi and others spend it. You can have a maximum of 4 Chi normally, and its main purpose for tanks is to be used on active mitigation tools, or damage reduction abilities. Now, before you let your fists of fury fly, let's talk about setting up your monk. First things first, you'll want to choose your talents. At level 15, you'll unlock Tier 1 talents, which include Celerity, which lets you roll a lot more, Tiger's Lust, which gives you a big speed boost move, and Momentum, which causes your rolls to give you a movement speed boost when you use them. As we'll see, roll is a great mobility tool for monks, but we won't be using it that often. These talents generally aren't going to matter too much for tanking, so I would normally choose Celerity for the ease of use and passive benefit, although Tiger's Lust is probably the better overall choice. Something to note is that Tiger's Lust can actually be cast on other group members, making it very versatile. Any of them can be useful at different times though, so keep that in mind. At level 30, you'll unlock your Tier 2 talents, including Chi Wave, which is a heal damage spell that bounces around to nearby targets, Zen Sphere, which is a heal over time that explodes into an AoE heal, and Chi Burst, which heals everything friendly and hurts everything unfriendly in a giant cone in front of you. None of these talents have a huge impact on your performance, but I like Zen Sphere overall for the single target heal. Its low cooldown and automatic explosion if you get low on health is pretty good as a tank, so it's relatively mindless to just cast it on cooldown on yourself. Technically, you should be waiting for it to explode before recasting on yourself, but I find just using it on cooldown is pretty effective overall and doesn't require a lot of thinking. The other two aren't bad, but Zen Sphere is definitely my recommendation. Tier 3 talents unlock at level 45, and include Power Strikes, which gives you some bonus Chi from time to time, Ascension, which increases your max Chi to 5 and gives you some more energy regen, and Chi Brew, which is a defensive cooldown that gives Chi, elusive brew stacks, and has 2 charges at a time. To be fair, I think Chi Brew is a really good talent for tanks, and some nice on-demand survivability, but the truth of the matter is that we don't really need Chi on demand most of the time, and elusive brew isn't really that hard to use anyway. The other two are really great passive abilities, but I think Power Strikes is slightly better. Basically, it'll just give you more Chi over the course of a fight, so it can be used as more active. It can be a more active mitigation abilities, or you can use more of the active mitigation abilities. Excuse me. At level 60, you'll unlock Tier 4 talents, including Ring of Peace, which makes a CC or crowd control field, Charging Ox Wave, which makes a line stun in front of you, and Leg Sweep, which is an AoE stun. These are all situational talents that likely won't matter terribly much for your tanking ability. In general, I like Charging Ox Wave because it can be used at a range and get stun on enemies which is really far away, which is really nice. At level 75, you'll unlock your Tier 5 talents, which include Healing Elixirs, providing you some passive healing during the fight, Dampen Harm, which is a defensive cooldown, and Diffuse Magic, which is a magic defensive cooldown. Diffuse Magic is a major damage reduction for magic, but it doesn't last very long, so it's only useful for fights with huge spikes of magic damage in the middle. Dampen Harm is a great cooldown that can be used to tank some big hits or even just some strong normal hits. All in all, I think that Dampen Harm is the best talent here, but I still tend to stick with healing elixirs because it does a lot of healing over the course of the fight. The big drawback with healing elixirs is that it isn't on demand and you have very, very little control over when you use it. But it automatically will be used with your normal abilities, so I just kind of recommend taking it as a newer tank. You have plenty of other things to worry about. I like more passive things. Now, Tier 6 talents will unlock at level 90 and include Rushing Jade Wind, which is an improved version of one of your AoE moves, Invoke Swen, I think that's how you say it, Haswen, the White Tiger, which summons a pet tiger for increased DPS, and Chi Torpedo, which improves your roll to heal and damage things in its path. Overall, this really isn't a big decision to make, sadly, since they're all kind of good but don't really provide much for tanking. I think Invoke Swen is probably the best choice, since it does really good damage for a long period and even has some AoE damage from the tiger's cleaves. Now, the final tier of talents opens up at level 100 and includes Soul Dance, which lets you stagger a portion of magic damage in addition to physical damage stagger, Chi Explosion, which changes your blackout kick quite significantly, and Serenity, which lets you spam Chi moves for 10 seconds. Honestly, I feel like all of these talents have some very, very strong uses in specific fights or specific places, but I can't strongly recommend any of them without a lot more testing. So, for newer tanks, I would go ahead and recommend Soul Dance for your normal play, since it won't change your rotation and add any buttons for you to press. I think that Serenity might be a great talent if used correctly, but I like Soul Dance because of its general nature just to increase our survivability against magic damage. Chi Explosion is a very strange move that can change how you play quite a bit, so I don't really recommend it for a newer tank. And that's all for talents, so let's go ahead and recap. I recommend Celerity, Zen Sphere, Power Strikes, Charging Oxwave, Healing Elixirs, Invoke Swen, and Soul Dance. With this setup, you'll be using Swen and Zen Sphere on cooldown, and charging Oxwave when you need a ranged stun. Otherwise, everything's passive. Awesome. Now, for the next piece of setup, Glyphs. You'll get 3 major glyph slots and 3 minor glyph slots. First up, let's look at possible major glyphs. Glyph of Fortuitous Spheres will create healing spheres around you when you get low on health. It's never a bad option as long as you're actually going to be picking up those spheres, but it's absolutely useless if you don't do it. Now, Glyph of Touch of Death lets you use Touch of Death less often, but it removes its cost. Basically letting you use it whenever you want, but less frequently. I like this one quite a lot. Glyph of Keg Smash increases your Keg Smash range by 5 yards. This is a minor help, but it's not a huge increase to any of our abilities. Just a little bit of a life improvement glyph. Now, Glyph of Zen Meditation lets you move while using Zen Meditation, which I love. It also stops you from accidentally canceling it by moving, which I also love because I'm really bad about doing that. Glyph of Fortifying Brew gives you 5% more damage reduction from the move at the expense of 10% of the health bonus. This is a potentially good glyph, although I really kind of like that big health increase. Glyph of Leer of the Ox gives you a new ability to allow your statue to taunt, your Black Ox statue, although it doesn't really work on most raid bosses, so it's pretty limited in its use. Glyph of Expel Harm isn't bad at all, reducing the cost of Expel Harm by 5 energy when you're low on health. Since, as a Brewmaster, it actually has no cooldown at low health, this can actually be very helpful to get that healing quicker, although it's really so small of an energy change that I don't find it incredibly useful. Glyph of Guard will make Guard 10% stronger, but it'll only eat magic damage instead of all damage. This is a really weird glyph because its actually main use that I've seen would be in fights that are completely physical, making sure that it actually stays up for the whole duration. This allows you to keep the healing buff the entire time, which is slightly better than just using Guard. However, with the updates to Guard to have 2 charges when you get to high level, I actually don't recommend this glyph at all in almost any circumstances, because it is better served as a damage shield than a healing buff. Now, minor glyphs are mostly ignorable, although Glyph of Spirit Roll and Glyph of Water Roll are really useful for getting around. My overall suggestions would probably be Fortuitous Spheres, but you gotta remember to pick up those spheres, Touch of Death, and Zen Meditation for general use. These are really small quality of life upgrades that'll kind of just help in general. Now, we're all set and ready to go, so let's talk abilities. Monks generally have 2 sets of abilities. Chi generating abilities that cost energy to build up Chi, and Chi spenders that cost your Chi normally to provide survivability. First, let's talk about the generators, which mainly include Keg Smash, Jab, and Expel Harm. Keg Smash is our big move, dealing damage to the target and a few nearby targets as well, applying a slow to them and generating 2 Chi. It does cost 40 energy and has quite a little bit of a cooldown, but it's our #1 priority to use this whenever it's available, so we can generate the most Chi and deal the most damage. The only time you wouldn't want to use this is when you have 3 or more Chi, because then it would be wasted. You'd want to spend your Chi first, then Keg Smash afterwards. Now, Expel Harm is our second Chi generator, healing yourself and dealing a small amount of damage as well to the nearest enemy or your target, I believe, while generating 1 Chi. It costs energy as well and has a cooldown, but when you're low in health, the cooldown is actually removed, making it instant cast and spammable, as long as you can afford it with the energy. This is our second priority unless you're full on health. Jab is our last Chi generator, doing damage and gaining 1 Chi for a bit of energy. This is really the filler move that you'll use to generate most of your Chi most of the time, and the best way to make sure that you're never capped on energy. And that pretty much covers the main Chi generators. The next set of moves we'll discuss are your Chi spenders, which include Blackout Kick, Guard, and Purifying Brew. Now, Blackout Kick is the move we'll be using probably the most. It costs 2 Chi, deals some damage to your target, and most importantly, applies a 6-second buff called Shuffle to you. This will increase your stagger amount. We'll cover this in just a bit in more detail. Now, Purifying Brew is another move we'll use often. It costs 1 Chi and will remove all damage that you've staggered that is currently on you as a DOT. Again, more on this in just a second. Now, Guard is our nice defensive cooldown. It's on a 30-second cooldown, costs 2 Chi, and puts a nice shield on you to absorb all damage. At max level, you'll actually get 2 charges of it, meaning that you can use it effectively every 15 seconds for a nice damage shield. Most of the time when fighting bosses, it will get eaten pretty quickly, but it should pretty much be used as often as possible to get the most shield out of it. There's one caveat that I've been unable to find info on. I don't know if using Guard's second charge while having the first guard up stacks or not. So to be safe, you'll want to only use Guard's second stack or use Guard at all after you no longer have the shield that Guard provides. This won't be hard in raids because that shield gets popped really quickly before you even get the chance to probably get enough Chi for the second one. But do be aware that I don't know if they stack or not. I haven't been able to test it yet. So before we go further, let's jump back into that stagger mechanic. As I explained, stagger lets you put a percentage of damage into a DOT on you, effectively spreading out some of the damage over a period of time. Several of your moves are based off of this stagger amount, primarily Blackout Kick and Purifying Brew. Using Blackout Kick gives you the shuffle buff for 6 seconds, increasing your stagger percentage by 10% and your parry chance by 10% as well. This means that you'll be taking less damage up front and more damage over time. Importantly, if you use Blackout Kick while you have the shuffle buff up, it'll actually extend the buff by 6 seconds. For example, if you have 3 seconds left of the shuffle buff on you and use Blackout Kick, you'll go up to 9 seconds of shuffle. Because of this, you can actually should use Blackout Kick whenever you're about to lose shuffle to extend that duration. And you should be able to actually maintain the shuffle buff 100% of the time. Given enough time, you can actually have several minutes worth of shuffle on you if you're so inclined. Now, this by itself really won't do anything for you, as you'll still be taking the full damage just over a long period of time. That's where Purifying Brew comes in. Using Purifying Brew removes the stagger DOT, effectively removing all the damage that you would have taken over the rest of the duration of the buff, or debuff if you want to call it that. Generally, you'll want to wait for the stagger buff to be higher before using Purifying Brew to remove it, since it does cost 1 Chi, but don't be afraid to use it when that stagger DOT is yellow or red. Now, this is one of the most important aspects of playing a Brewmaster Monk, controlling your stagger damage. You basically have to do this dance of keeping up shuffle, keeping up guard as much as possible, and purifying away stagger when it gets high. This is all dependent on Chi, so you'll have to continuously manage both your energy and your Chi resource effectively. Now, don't get me wrong though, monks are fun. Out of all the things I've explained, there's only 6 moves really. 3 to make Chi and 3 to spend it. However, there are a few more moves at your disposal on a regular basis, and we'll need to discuss those. First is Tiger Palm. This is essentially a free spell just to fill your time. You'll want to use this when you don't have enough time, or don't have enough chi for something effective, and don't have enough energy for jab, and everything else is on cooldown. You'll also want to throw this in every once in a while just to maintain the damage boost it gives you. It's actually not mandatory and shouldn't really overshadow any other important active mitigation moves like Keg Smash or something, but try to fit this in for bonus damage when you can. Breath of Fire is your main damaging AoE move. This will actually deal lots of damage to targets in front of you and apply a DOT to them as well. It does cost 2 chi though, so it should only be used when you're not in danger of losing Shuffle and can spare the chi. Luckily, we have a better AoE tool for holding threat, Dizzying Haze. This is a move that lets you throw out a keg of beer and douse enemies in it, slowing their movement speed, but more importantly making them super mad at you. I don't know about you, but if somebody doused me in beer, I would be super mad too. In fact, I probably have footage of that very thing happening. Either way, this costs nothing to use and can be used repeatedly, so you can spam this for days to grab all the mobs you can handle. It is great for when the ads can be slowed as well, which makes which lets monk tanks kite for long periods of time. This will be your go-to threat holder for any decent sized group of enemies, but remember that it doesn't do any damage at all. Now for AoE damage, if you don't have chi for Breath of Fire, you can actually use Spinning Crane Kick. This move deals damage constantly for a few seconds, and even better, it generates chi if it hits lots of enemies. This is a great move to spam when there's lots of enemies, as it deals a good amount of damage and generates chi, so you can then use Breath of Fire or Blackout Kick if you need that shuffle buff up. Crackling Jade Lightning is our ranged attack, in case you somehow can't reach your enemy. It deals a good amount of damage over time, but you have to channel it. This is really only useful if you absolutely can't get close enough to your enemy for some odd reason. And that pretty much covers all the basic moves you'll be using all of the time. To give a quick recap, let's use Blackout Kick whenever we have chi, just to keep that shuffle buff rolling. Use Keg Smash whenever it's on cooldown. Jab when you have the energy for chi, and keep guard up at all times, or at least as often as possible. Expel Harm should be used if you're not full health and you're getting low especially, and Purifying Brew should be used when your stagger gets high. Fill in any gaps with Tiger Palm, and use Dizzying Haze to hold threat on groups of enemies. So next up we'll cover our defensive cooldowns, of which Brewmasters have 3. Elusive Brew, Zen Meditation, and Fortifying Brew. Now, Elusive Brew is almost less of a cooldown and more of active mitigation, but I still consider it one, so we'll go ahead and cover it here. Basically, your critical strikes will grant you stacks of a buff, which are consumed when you use Elusive Brew. Now, for every stack you have, you get 1 second of extra dodge, and you can hold up to 15 stacks. Generally, you can keep this up all the time, unless you somehow critically strike... you can't keep this up all the time, unless you can somehow increase, or critically strike every single second. But, you really can't use it as a defensive cooldown to avoid physical damage because you can't keep it up all the time. Now, your dodge chance increases significantly when you use this, and you can't go beyond 15 stacks, so you should really either use it for a specific mechanic in the fight, such as an enrage for a boss, or just use it very frequently so you don't actually reach that maximum number of stacks. I recommend using it whenever you're between 5 and 10 stacks, just so it doesn't go to waste. Now, as long as you're using it frequently enough, it really shouldn't be a waste, and don't hesitate to use it unless you know some big mechanic is coming in the fight shortly. Now, Zen Meditation is a very interesting skill. It reduces all damage you take, both physical and magical, by 90% for 8 seconds, which is ridiculous. But it's channeled, meaning you can't move or attack. Now, with the glyph, you can at least move. But there is one more problem. Taking any melee hit immediately stops the effect. This means that Zen Meditation can only be used really to severely reduce incoming magic damage for 8 seconds, or it can save you from a single physical attack. This is a great move to use on big single hits, especially one with a channel time so that you can kind of time it right. But the only time this move is nearly impossible to use is when you're fighting with ads. As ads normally do kind of melee attacks on you and generally just end the spell immediately. On any fight without ads, keep this at the ready to cut a lot of damage out of either one attack or multiple attacks if they're magical. Now, Fortifying Brew is the major cooldown for Brewmasters, increasing our health by 20% and your stagger by 20% as well. This severely reduces the amount of damage you'll be taking from attacks immediately, with the extra 20% going to stagger. And with the large amount of health increase, it'll actually help you handle larger amounts of stagger. Be careful though, as larger amounts of stagger will need more purifying brews to clear out, especially after the effects end, and you go back down to less health because that stagger doesn't go away. It's best to use this before you take big hits to cut the damage with the bonus stagger, although you can use it reactively when you're low health, just to stay alive, albeit slightly less effectively. And that pretty much covers your major cooldowns. But let's talk about some of the other moves you have at your disposal. Provoke is your main taunt, which makes the enemy focus you for a few seconds, and increases your threat output. If you taunt an enemy and don't hit it within a few seconds, it'll go back to its previous target, so be sure to actually hit it with something after you taunt. Summon Black Ox Statue is a move that you should really use whenever you can, as it provides two potential benefits. The first is a radiating zone of threat, making any creatures nearby want to hit you more. The second is an active use. If you use your Provoke, that taunt move that I was just talking about, on your statue, it'll actually taunt all enemies close to the statue, giving you an AoE taunt. Granted that using Dizzying Haze is just as easy, this isn't terribly necessary, but at the very least you should put the statue down for the passive threat generation anyway. Now, Nimble Brew is a move that reduces CC effects on you and can be used in specific situations. Spearhand Strike is your basic interrupt. Legacy of the Emperor is your buff for the whole raid group, which will increase the stats of your group. Touch of Death is a great offensive cooldown. I say offensive with air quotes. It can actually only be used on enemies with less health than you, or with less than 10% of their total health, but it causes instant death. It is absolutely fantastic to use this move whenever you can. It's on a long cooldown and costs 3 chi normally, but if you glyph it, you can use it for free with a longer cooldown. You can often use this on ads and even some bosses, although I would never expect it to work, just in case. Think of it as the ultimate execute move. Now, the last active ability I'm going to discuss is Roll. It is a great mobility tool for monks, allowing you to roll in the direction you're moving very quickly. This can be used to get around or in position for fights very quickly. The only problem is that you cannot use skills or spells when rolling, and you can't cancel it or change direction once you've started. This is relatively minor, but important to know. Based on your Tier 1 talent, your roll can be used in a variety of ways as well, depending on what you've picked. Now, last but not least is your Gift of the Ox, which is a passive ability that will spawn healing spheres around you based on your multi-strikes. Bit of a spoiler warning, I don't recommend prioritizing multi-strike as a stat, so I don't know how relevant this will be, but when they do spawn, you'll want to be prepared to use them. All you have to do is run over the sphere to consume it, being healed for a small amount. This means that while tanking and pressing abilities, you'll probably want to step from side to side often to pick up those healing spheres that spawn if you need to. That covers pretty much all of the major abilities that are available to you as a Brewmaster. So finally, we'll cover some stat priorities. You'll be on the lookout for leather gear with specific stats, so here's a rundown of the best stats for you. Stats for monks are a bit hard for me to nail down, since most of them will give you a lot of benefit. What I can tell you is that bonus armor and mastery are likely to be the top of the list, because mastery increases your stagger percentage along with your attack power, and bonus armor is just better damage reduction overall. Haste is likely next, because it gives you more energy regen, which will in turn let you generate more chi, and allows you to spam moves faster like Purifying Brew and Tiger Palm, or even Jab with enough energy. Now, stamina is going to be necessary since you'll be taking lots of damage, but all gear will kind of come with stamina anyway. I would say the bottom 3 stats are going to be Versatility, Critical Strike, and Multi-Strike. Versatility just increases your damage and healing, but your healing isn't amazing in general, so this isn't much of a survivability boost. Crit will give you more Elusive Brews along with damage, but Elusive Brew still isn't as available as other cooldowns or as effective as more stagger on your mastery. Multi-Strike will give you more hits and heals, and it will increase the amount of healing spheres you generate, but overall, it's not a very good stat for monks in general. So preferably, you'll want gear with bonus armor, mastery, or haste before the other stats. Hopefully you've enjoyed this guide for dummies. You should be ready to go move like the wind, but if you're interested in a quick rundown of the changes for Mists of Pandaria, stick around. So the monk's core abilities didn't change much from Mop, but a lot of side abilities did. One thing that does change at the new levels is giving guard a second charge. This is an awesome change to let us keep guard up more frequently and make it feel like we're really doing even more to keep ourselves alive. That being said, our Ox statue no longer provides guard to raid members, which is a big bummer. Honestly, the statue doesn't do much for us now except give us a bit of AoE threat, so it's almost unnecessary if you're decently geared, especially since Dizzying Haze has no longer has an energy cost and can be spammed at will. A few talents did change slightly. The changes are mostly minor but could affect your talent choices, since things like Zen Sphere and Power Strikes are slightly better now, and Ascension is slightly worse. Dampen Harm is slightly better in non-raids, thanks to the change in minimum damage needed for it to actually activate. You'll be seeing a lot of less healing spheres on the ground, I think, thanks to the changes in the Gift of the Ox, unless you've got a decent amount of multi-strike. A change that makes me a sad panda, Rian, get it, Pandarian? Pandarian? Yeah, whatever, is the removal of Clash. I loved Clash for a lot of reasons, and still don't know why Blizzard wanted to remove it. But, sadly, it's gone. Grapple Weapon is also gone, although I didn't really value this one nearly as much. In general, the Brewmaster feels similar to the old playstyle with shuffles and guards. We'll have to wait and see how everything pans out for them over the course of the expansion, since right now I feel like they have a lot of complicated mechanics and a lot of fun gameplay, but you have to do a whole bunch and just keep track of a whole lot just to be an average tank and do your normal function as a tank. Still, it is a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed this full guide for Brewmaster Monks. Please check my other tanking guides as well as dungeon and raid guides once they're uploaded. Please like, favorite, share, subscribe, all that jazz, and, as always, you keep it salty, Internet.